The science that goes into this underwater site may provide some of the most important evidence that we have had to prove that these civilizations existed before the last ice age, before 12,000 years ago. We are diving down to the underwater ruins on Lake Vaughan that are 85 feet underwater. They are the deepest confirmed underwater ruins anywhere in the world. We have scientific data that show when that volcano erupted, Murat River was blocked, proving that these ruins are at least 12,000 years old. The flower of life that's on that capstone underwater has 6 spokes exactly like the Osirian flower of life. This is the newest ancient site of significance like this in the world. The reason why there's so many similarities with this idea of Peru and Bolivia with Lake Vaughan and Cambodia being a global culture is that that was represented potentially by Atlantis, is that that's what Atlantis was. It was that global civilization. From 14,500 years ago to 11,500 years ago, you have a series of about 3 events that led to the destruction of this entire global civilization.
Yeah, it's been great to get to know you over the last couple of days, man. Really enjoyed dinner with you last night. And
yeah, me too.
It's clear that you've got a huge passion for what you do. I was kind of curious, like, how did you start off in this field? And maybe even backing up before that, like, where'd you grow up and what was early life like for you?
Yeah, I've had quite a journey in my life so far, Matt. I feel like I lived 2 different lives and within just this life. And what I mean by that, I don't mean like a deep esoteric way. I just mean that the first half of my life, I almost settled in for a different kind of life. I grew up in New Hampshire, a little tiny town, went to school, Plymouth State University, got a science degree, but I was always incredibly interested in the climatology and geology and ancient history and astronomy. There was a lot of areas that I was very passionate about. And when I went to college, I didn't know what I wanted to major in. I actually jumped around and had some different majors before I settled into an environmental science major. But I always had just fascinations and interest in so many areas. And I wasn't sure where that was going to lead. And what ended up happening was I ended up buying a house after college and got married and had a cat and a dog, and I was just, sort of hiking around and fishing in Maine. And I was on the path to have that kind of life. And that was not the kind of life that I wanted. There was an unsettling feeling of just having that life. It wasn't what I wanted. It was something greater that was stirring about ancient lost mysteries and secrets. And when I was living in Maine, I ended up working for, when I got out of college, I worked for a mapping company for 13 years. I'm a huge mapping geography nerd. That's one of my passions. In fact, when I was young, I was a really unusual kid who, instead of reading comic books, I was reading topo maps. That was fascinating to me. I would pick a region in the world, or in this case, usually like North America or the United States, and I would study the geography and the biomes. I was like fascinated. And I would say like, what an amazing place this looks. Deep in the mountains in the wilderness somewhere. I'm like, I'm gonna go there sometime. And that was the kind of kid I was. I would walk around the playground and everybody was like playing games together and I'm just sort of alone looking for like crystals and coins. And I was a very unusual kid, and most kids throughout my life like didn't understand me. I got pretty picked on and bullied a lot of my time in school. But I never really conformed to that kind of mindset or thinking. I was always just different and unique and unusual. And go forward, when I was living in Maine and I was working for a mapping company, I worked remotely for 10 years, which is a long time. And I was in a very quiet place, just out in nature in a house I had, and there was no noise or anything. And I had this enormous amount of time, Matt. Like just time. And I think that's the thing that's most missing from people, is having a lot of time. And at first I kind of squandered it and really didn't use it very well. But eventually, over the course of the remaining 8 years, I realized that why not just turn this into an opportunity to have like my own little mystery school? Because I found my job to be so easy that it used such a small amount of my brain power that I would just multitask and listen to audio for anything I could to try to learn So I went through like a whole 8-year plus period of my own little like fun curriculum on because I felt like I really didn't get nearly enough out of college and high school that I wanted to really learn about things, learn about biomes, learn about the earth in different ways, learn about esoteric, learn about ancient civilizations. And that's when I started to get really into ancient civilizations. It was during that time period after I had honed in, exploring every topic I could imagine and trying to understand it in a deeper level. Like spent a lot of time with the climatology and ice cores, spent a long time with geology. But then I settled into ancient civilizations and lost history. And I found that because I had a background in a lot of those areas, it really benefited understanding. For instance, like when you're looking at the masonry of massive megalithic walls, in order to understand how they were built and the complexity that goes into them and the type of stone and how hard it would be to create them, you really need to have a geologic background. You can't just look at it and be like, well, I don't know what kind of stone that is. It matters. You really need to understand the Mohs hardness scale of things like andesite and basalt versus things like limestone. It's really important to understand because it gives you a way of saying, how could iron or Bronze Age tools have created these things out of this? The tools are far softer than the materials they're working with. And so here I am in Maine. I'm finding my greatest passion of all time. And it was speaking to me on a very deep level. And I was very much walking that walk of trying to explore not only just ancient civilizations and how they built things, but what their ideology was, what their mentality was. What are they leaving behind? Why do they build the temples in the way they did? Why were they aligned like they were? What was their purpose with consciousness and energy and, law of correspondence with the stars and the earth? It all became part of my path without even realizing it. And I was so far on that path that is ultimately what triggered and led me to want to just live a completely different life. And I was given that opportunity, and I feel unbelievably grateful that I was given that opportunity. And I ended up working. The opportunity was that I got a great job, especially at the time, working on and being like an integral part of Ancient Civilizations and other shows on Gaia. And so that allowed me to sell my house. I ended up getting divorced. I ended up starting a whole new life in Colorado. It's like most people don't start over again at like 36 years old or whatever it is, right? And I got to start over again. And that ultimately, from that point on, is what led me into everything that I'm doing now. It's a pretty incredible story, actually. That's really just the beginning.
When did you move out to Colorado? What year?
I moved out to Colorado in 2020, I think.
Okay. Yeah, that's cool, man. So you're just following your passion.
It's like, floating on the wind. I sort of just keep ending up somewhere else. Like I'm in California now. So I'm just keep floating and seeing where it ends up. But I very, very thankful for the fact that I ended up meeting an amazing man named Martin Young who saw the potential in everything that I was trying to do and unlock and really believed in me and allowed me to have an opportunity to live my dreams. And subsequently, in developing a very important documentary, which we can talk about at some point, but he was instrumental in me being able to visit so many of these sites that I had to study that I was working on, and then develop an entire team from around the world to come together to create a documentary unlike anything that's ever been done, with top academics in their field that are coming together to challenge the old paradigm and narrative of ancient civilizations. I do not believe anything like that has ever happened. And I think that because the reason is, it's not that there hasn't been a documentary with people that have come together talking, but top academics coming together to challenge the narrative, the status quo. And that is exactly what we're doing in a non-aggressive way and in a very open way. We work with archaeologists all over Turkey. We have some on our team. We are all about preserving the interest and respect of later ancient cultures that were in that area, but at the same time objectively exploring the possibility of an earlier lost civilization. And that's essentially what we're doing. So we're not trying to step on archaeologists' feet and be like, you guys are totally wrong. Like, come on, We're more like, hey, let's work together. And what about these anomalies or these questions? You know, what do you think about that? And so we've had amazing conversations with archaeologists. And even if you don't agree, there's no reason to not just have a great conversation around it and present your evidence.
Yeah, let's explore the possibilities.
Exactly.
Yeah. So how long has the team been together, and who's on the team?
So this has been an ongoing thing for the last year to a year and a half. It started with a very primitive means, and I've been unbelievably blown away by how it's escalated. And one of the things I want to say for everyone listening to this, there's been a lot of people who have contributed towards that, and I am so thankful for what you've done. It makes this whole thing possible. And so it started from a primitive means, and we only had a couple experts at first. And what's beautiful about the way that we're guided in life and the way that important things happen in a specific way when they need to is that we were actually unable to get permits in time. We were going to film last year. We had a much smaller core team of experts. We were missing a lot of the big ones that we have now. And it was beautiful because we didn't get permits and we had to pull the whole filming trip at like the last minute. Okay. But because of that, we ended up growing the team in ways that I could never have imagined. And the project grew, and it's in the most beautiful place now where it wasn't in before. And now we have like 9 experts, and we have some of the top experts in the world. Yeah, there you go. And so we have Dr. Robert Schoch, which is one of the leading, if not the most famous geologist in the world, who of course in 1990 went to visit John Anthony West and was the one who spearheaded the entire water erosion, the Sphinx enclosure, which I'm sure we'll talk about. And then we have Ömer Tanyuruk, who is one of the top archaeologists in Turkey working on Kefkalesi. So, I mean, that is a huge deal in itself. We have Hans Orheim, another archaeologist. In total, we actually even have a third archaeologist named Jennifer Deo, who is in the first part of the documentary. She's not on this, so we have 3 archaeologists. Then we have sacred geometry expert Robert Edward Grant. We have geobiologist Dr. Lydia De Leon, sacred architecture expert Arturo De Leon, and then a big hitter here I want to point out, Tausen Salem. This man was instrumental along with other people, and I want to give him a huge applause for everything he did to help us get all the permits we need. He was the discoverer of the underwater ruins under Lake Van.
Wow.
He is one of the most famous videographer, filmmaker, nature underwater filmmakers in Turkey, hands down. He's very famous there. And so he joined the team, and his collaboration has been huge in this project. And we'll talk about the underwater ruins and the diving we're going to be doing. And then, of course, Paul Wallace, who is a religious expert. We have an awesome team, just like legendary team
Powerhouse
here. Yeah.
Yeah, nice, man. Congratulations. That's
Thank
fantastic.
you.
Yeah. I want to be like Robert Schoch when I'm 85 years old or whatever. I mean, he is sharp. How old is he? He's a sharp
He's not quite
guy.
that old.
He's not? Okay.
He's more like I think he's 70, but
oh, really?
We just got back from Peru and Bolivia. He's running around, hiking everywhere.
68. Why did I think he was so much older?
Yeah, so he's not even 70 yet.
Yeah, okay,
he's running around. He didn't have any issues climbing like vertical ascents up to like Napa and Glacia and everything. So he's in great shape. I really appreciate Robert. He's definitely one of we have a great professional relationship of working together now for a couple of years, and I have a huge amount of respect for him. I'm looking forward to everything that we're going to do in the future.
He had a very impressive presentation at Cosmic Summit. Like Robert was, but somebody told me he was older than that, and so this is why I need to vet things before I just repeat them.
Yeah, his work is pivotal and incredible. He's the only, in my opinion, extremely well accredited PhD academic with the kind of credentials he has of that high level who is challenging the narrative. And he has had a very tough road because of how much backlash he's gotten over the years because of this. Because remember, it's been 25 years since the Sphinx enclosure with water erosion. And so that's a lot of years to try to change a narrative and have a lot of pushback and continuous challenges.
It is, for sure. So what are the next steps for the team then? What are you guys, what happens next?
So we got all the permits. amazing. Like it's such a dream come true to be able to do what we're about to do. And it is something that has never been done. Ionis, the Haldi Temple of Ionis, is one of the sites around Lake Vaughan, has never been filmed. It was just found in 2001. It's brand new. The underwater ruins have only had some scattered images, photographs taken of them, been a little tiny bit of footage on YouTube for that Tossin had put together, but for the most part, the world doesn't know about them yet. We will be the first to showcase these underwater ruins to the world and sites like Ionis and a lot of others around there. But it's not just focused around Turkey. It's focused around the connections and symbols that are in Turkey to Peru, Bolivia, Egypt, and Cambodia. And after we film in Turkey, we will be filming in Cambodia as well. We just finished filming in Peru and Bolivia, and we've already we started the filming in the, it was awesome. It's the Penn Archive Library. It's such a cool library. If you ever got a chance to go to Penn Museum, you can ask for a special invitation to get into the archive library. It is one of the most significant sources of ancient information and knowledge in all of North America, hands down. Penn Museum played a pivotal part in excavations throughout Turkey and Iraq in 1930s and up through the 2000s. And they subsequently have an enormous amount of papers and documents from those excavations there, which is why we went to go through their archives and start the documentary in a library, doing research that then expands out to the field and then explores incredible ancient mysteries and connections, but not just things that are like, wow, look, that looks like beautiful stonework. That must be lost civilizations. No, we're dialing this in to study ancient volcanic eruptions and sediment cores and the depths of things and the specific cuts and symbols and how it all relates. We're trying to get as much science behind this to bring together a non-aggressive attempt to help change the narrative of history. And so the next steps are in 3 weeks, literally from, I think, today, we are going to be in Turkey starting the most important filming of all, which is going to be by far the most challenging project in my life. I mean, we are diving down to the underwater ruins on Lake Vaughan that are 85 feet underwater. They are the deepest confirmed underwater ruins, confirmed, anywhere in the world, including oceans. And if for anyone listening to this, like, they will probably say, what about Cuba? That's not confirmed. And that's a whole nother thing. But so we have a whole dive team. We're going to be going down to see these incredible ruins. We are going to be exploring extensively temples and sites that the world has never seen yet, and then places they have seen to compare. So that's what the next journey is going to be, and we're going to be. The hope is that the documentary will be released before the end of 2025. Nice.
Where's it going to be released?
Well, we still don't have a home yet. We're hoping for Netflix or Amazon.
Okay, cool. Yeah, but wherever it's going to be released, regardless of what I mean. You put it out on YouTube if it doesn't get picked up.
If we have to, that's the very lowest.
Yeah.
Option that we end up doing, but still, we can still have a huge success on that. So I'm not worried about where it ends up.
Nobody is. Yeah, people just want to watch it.
For anyone interested in obtaining or having that end up being somewhere, like, we can wait until let them come to us. Yeah. We're not worried about that.
Right. Yeah. Cool. No, that's exciting, man. Really pumped up.
Thanks.
So Cambodia, Peru. And then was there one more after that?
It's the filming is in, and this is actually unusual for documentaries in itself. I mean, we go from the Penn Archives in Pennsylvania, United States, to sites all across Turkey, including diving underwater, to Cambodia, and then it ends with Peru, and then ends with Bolivia.
Bolivia is last.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Cool, man. That's freaking cool. Let's go to Turkey maybe to start. Is that cool?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Yeah. I mean, the Lake Vaughan situation. I mean, as long as you've kind of teased it and teed it up a little bit, I think people
Yeah.
want to dive in to understand what that is. And so this was a site you mentioned that was just more recently discovered within the last 3 decades, and it was kind of written off as being belonging to a specific civilization.
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
Okay, so we can start, I think, with the underwater ruins. I think a lot of people would be really interested in that, and then there's some other things around Turkey we can start discuss. But the reason I was at Penn. This is important to connect to that. The reason I was at Penn was that they have the excavation records from an ancient city in Iraq called Shuruppak. Shuruppak was the last city mentioned in ancient cuneiform tablets throughout, from the Sumerians, Assyrians, Akkadians, and Babylonians, all the various civilizations that have been in that area, and there's others too. But they left behind cuneiform tablets with incredible stories. So the oldest stories written, bar none, in the world, because paper lasts 500 to 1,000 years. Oral traditions are difficult to keep intact. They change over time. So the only way to leave behind a message for essentially an enormous amount of time is you can use a type of writing style called cuneiform, which is basically wedges in either clay or stone. And when you do that, you create a situation where it's indented into it rather than being on the surface and doesn't wipe away or rub off like writing or a painting or whatever it is. And so it can last for 5,000 to potentially longer years. 5,000 years, depending on the condition of its preservation. Now, something really happened interesting with a lot of those tablets is that had huge fires in ancient Nineveh, this city that was there during deep antiquity, and the tablets were actually baked, which actually helped preserve them. And then they were buried. And so when a lot of these things emerged, there was a story that had come out of that, of this legacy of a great survivor of a catastrophe, a flood. And we know that in religious sects as the Noah story. And I want everyone to put that aside and just kind of ignore everything you've heard about the Noah story. That original story does not come from Christianity. 100%, you can look at all scholars agree. It comes from the Mesopotamian stories of a combination of, and it's like a rewritten over and over again in different versions of the Atrahasis, the Epic of Gilgamesh, and then other various versions of it in like Eridu-Genesis. There's a whole background of different tablets that have basically the same stories. Legend of Itzubar and others of an enormous flood that is supposed to come and wipe out the civilization of the original Sumerians. And I had found what I believed was comprehensive evidence in these excavation papers at Penn of proof that the bottom layer that they had excavated of what they knew with the Sumerians was actually from a far earlier time. And the reason I say that is that they had found a massive alluvial flood layer right above the Sumerian layer below. And they had dug down the whole project. It was from 1931 in Iraq, and Penn had gone out there because they wanted to see if they could find Shuruppak, because it's supposed to be like a mythical city that wasn't real. It was like a biblical kind of text, kind of concept where it wasn't a real place. Well, after going down through, they subsequently found the ruins of Shuruppak at 15 feet down. And in between there, they found evidence of 2 other civilizations above it. 2. And the one right above it, above this flood layer, was the time of Gilgamesh and the time of Uruk and all these different places. And what was so fascinating about this paper from 1931 is that here we have archaeologists discussing openly the idea that the original flood story from Zayasudra, his name was either Zayasudra or Utnapishtim, depending on if you're in the Sumerian or the Akkadian versions of the stories. Okay, same person though. On whether or not that story of a biblical flood and a surviving and arriving in like the Ararat region of Turkey was real. And here we have the story being perfectly represented by what was in the field. A massive flood layer above it. Massive. It was like 4 feet thick, okay, of no human remains and no human evidence at all. Just massive flood. And then below it you have Shuruppak, and then above it you have 2 other civilizations. And they had discussed how there was really interesting similarities between the flood stories out of those tablets and what they were finding. But it couldn't be, because that was just a myth. Well, I realized that there was something tangible here. And so what I did was I started exploring the Ararat region to try to see if I could find a connection further to this that was real, because I was deep in the whole world of the cities mentioned, specifically when they were existing, and like putting this ancient story together. And what ended up ticking me off to that was a map called the Babylonian Map of the World. Have you heard of it?
I don't think so.
It's the oldest map in existence. It's a cuneiform map that was found in the 1800s outside of Sippar, Iraq. And they subsequently could not translate most of it because they were missing pieces of it. Okay? Long story short, thank you very much for bringing that up. And if what you can see is there's a set of circles in the center, and then there are triangles that emanate around the outside, almost like sun spokes, it looks like. Each of these triangles represents codex information for translating and understanding the entire thing. Well, in the 1990s, there was a woman who was doing an internship at the British Museum where this is housed, and she found a fragment that had been misidentified and put in the wrong place, which was one of those triangles. And when they put it together, they realized that it was essentially the codex key to unlocking the entire thing. Okay? When they did that, they realized that it was a map to different locations across the ancient world. And one of the triangles pointed towards and said, the land of Ararat and the Ark. And it gave specific descriptions for the length and size of the Ark, and described it as truly there was an ancient cedar craft that was actually created, and that it on this map, it showed where the location of it had landed, like a tourist map in the ancient world. And it had a lot of other locations as well.
And when was this created?
Well, we don't actually know when it was created. It was found in Sippar. It was the Babylonians, they call it the Babylonian Map of the World, but we don't know if it was the Babylonians that inherited it or it was an earlier, like the Assyrians or Akkadians, but evidence shows it was most likely from ancient Babylon. And this was what led me to continuing the evidence, like what the Atrahasis had said and others, about the Ararat region being some kind of a special place. Something had happened there. And this is what led me to exploring the Lake Von region, which is only, it's not a huge distance from Mount Ararat. They're in the same region. And that's what subsequently led me to just starting to study the sites around the region and learning that there were places that the world didn't know about that were just found. And as someone who has studied ancient megalithic masonry of high quality around the world and identified this like key telltale sign of different cultures based on their work, it immediately caught my attention.
Okay. So yeah, that's incredible. So then on to Turkey. Yeah. So you'll be going there in a very short period of time, and you're going to be exploring. There's a couple of different sites there.
I didn't really talk about the sites. I was just kind of giving you the introduction.
Great introduction. I appreciate it. That adds a lot of great context. And so there's this lake, and maybe Ryan, if you can pull up a picture
Lake
so that
Von.
we can understand kind of the geography, because there's Lake Von, but then there's also some ancient ruins that exist right above,
all around the lake and under it. Yes.
Okay.
So Lake Von is a pretty unknown place. Most people have never heard of it, despite the fact that it is one of the deepest and most ancient lakes in the world. Okay, it is over 1,500 feet deep.
Wow.
Making it one of the deepest lakes. I mean, Lake Baikal in Russia and Siberia is certainly the deepest. But what's really interesting about Lake Von is that I've spent a lot of time there, and there's fishermen that fish the lake that do depth soundings, and they swear that it is far deeper than that. And so as I started studying,
the ruins are near the edge, and they're more at about 85 feet.
The ruins are in the northern part of the lake, off of a town called the Jijivez, and there's an ancient site above it called Kefkalesi that's a really important site in all my research and the work and the filming. And during the research of all these places, the underwater ruins were one of the first places that I had come across in this research, and it blew my mind, because here at 85 feet deep are spectacular, what look like basalt blocks of a high level of quality that have been built and placed in what likely was an ancient temple that is, again, as I mentioned, the deepest underwater ruins that have been identified so far in the world.
And you're gonna be able to tell on this trip whether or not they're basalt or what?
Oh yeah,
what they are?
we're going to have geologists, we're going to have archaeologists diving, we're going to be diving down to explore them. So what essentially happened was in the 1990s, 1997, Towson Salen was diving under Lake Vaughan to study the microinvertebrates in the underwater life, because it's a very unique life. It's a lake. It's got these really unique features that no lake in the world has. For instance, it is the largest soda lake on Earth, meaning that it's like an alkaline lake that has no outlet. And that is a key feature that we're going to talk about in this. And so he's diving down, and he goes off of a town called the Gigeves in the northern part of the lake, and he finds and discovers these unknown, mysterious ruins under the lake. Now, I will caution you for what we're seeing on there. There are Armenian ruins of ancient Armenia closer to shore and closer to some of the islands, but there's also the different kinds of megalithic work deeper that you'll see. So there's different levels of ruins in Lake Vaughan. They're not all the same. The deep ones are the ones we're interested in. And so there they are. So Towson announces this to some of the world. It didn't really get too far out into the world. It's so unusual that archaeologists have no idea whether it's from the Urartian civilization, which is 2,800 years ago, or it was so confusing to them because of the type of architecture, they even thought it might be medieval. They were all over the place in their understanding of it. And at first, they actually didn't even believe that it was real. Towson was like, yep, I can show you the footage. And so, unfortunately, Towson discovered what I think was one of the most significant archaeological discoveries in history. And he didn't get really very much attention for it because it's not labeled correctly or understood. And so part of this mission of him being involved in this is so he can finally get the credit that he deserves for what he discovered. And that is part of what we're doing down here, because the science that goes into this underwater site may provide some of the most, if not the most, important evidence that we have had since the water erosion and the Göbekli Tepe dating to prove that these civilizations existed before the last ice age, before 12,000 years ago. And I can, of course, go through all that data with you and tell you essentially what we're looking at. But on the screen, you can see a capstone that on the top that the rest of them largely broke, where you can see 3 different versions of flower of life-like symbols on it, which is spectacular.
Yeah, it's incredible. Has the place been mapped at all? Like, do you know what the structures kind of form, what they look like, their shape? Was it like buildings? Was it what like?
They seem to be circular like temples, but other than that, it has not been extensively mapped. We know that the area that they cover is significant. It's over half a mile. It's very large.
Half a mile?
Yes.
Oh my God, dude.
It's a huge area. It doesn't mean that they're all that kind of ruins.
Right.
There's blocks and things scattered. And you can see that temple has been significantly damaged. All of the stones on the top have broken off except for the edges. And the site itself.
That looks like Peru, like how they come together with the angles, like how they made those triangles in between the rocks, and it's just the front that appears flat. Like,
and it's beautiful, and it would have been perfectly carved. Let me give you an example. Look at how smooth the left side is and how the perfect joints, but the gaps are from earthquakes. There have been massive earthquakes. In fact, Lake Vaughan has significant seismic activity underwater. It has faults under the actual lake itself. And the area has had massive earthquakes. Even recently, the Temple of Haldian Ionis was significantly damaged by an earthquake somewhere around like 10 years ago or so. But so you can imagine at one point, all these stones were perfectly fit together. And you can see that on the left side, how perfect they are. There's literally no gaps between them. And this is not a type of technology that was available, as far as I'm aware. Any civilizations in the last 6,000 years did not have the technological means to be able to create the type of stonework and the type of work that we're seeing here. So
when was this above water?
Well, that's the whole thing that we can talk about.
Yeah.
And that is where it gets down to a fascinating scientific discussion. And if you want to talk about that right now, I can lay that out.
I mean, I'm good unless you think there's a better course to take.
Yeah. So this might be incredible for people listening to this who don't know. And I mean, you as a highly intellectual person will probably find this really fascinating. Lake Vaughan has had fluctuations in its history, but the significant fluctuations have been in paleo times. So we're in what's called the Holocene right now. We're talking pre-Holocene, pre-Younger Dryas, pre-Ice Age. The lake was very different. It was very different than it is now. And when I've done studies into the science of the lake, because the lake has actually been studied very extensively, as well as some of the volcanoes around it. There is a massive volcano on the southwest part of the lake called Mount Nemrut. And it's not to be confused with the Mount Nemrut that's in central Turkey with the big stone heads. There's actually two Mount Nemruts in Turkey, which is confusing. But this Mount Nemrut doesn't have any ancient ruins on it. But what it has is one of the largest volcanic calderas in the world. Basically, imagine a huge volcano. In ancient times, its entire top basically blew off. Something like Mount St. Helens, but even more significant. And yes, thank you. Massive caldera. And that shows you right there on the screen. In fact, it's such a big caldera and it's such an enormous volcano that it's been one of the most studied volcanoes in history. All the way back until the 1800s, it's been studied. And they've done a lot of soil sampling and analysis of the volcano, and they have a very, very good understanding of when its eruptions occurred, okay? They have a great idea of its history. And that became a pivotal part of this research because you can't date stone. So how you're going to prove lost civilizations' ages? Well, you need organic matter in most cases, but that's really difficult to find organic matter that hasn't been damaged or has been influenced by other things that have not allowed it to be a genuine way to measure ancient history. Göbekli Tepe was buried, so that was why they were able to date organic matter from that time period. Now, the next piece of evidence we have that is the only other thing really that's tangible is, of course, the Robert Schoch water erosion in the Sphinx enclosure, because there was no rain during dynastic Egyptian times. Well, this is the next one, because they know that Mount Nemrut's eruption, where it blew its top and exploded, occurred during the time period of the Younger or Older Dryas, meaning somewhere around either 14,500 years to 11,600 years. They mapped it out. They know that that's when it exploded, right? Which is so interesting because that's right during the volatility period of Earth that we study in ice cores and we see around the world, right? With this black mat and everything we see. So when I was studying the lake, I stumbled across something extremely significant. I find out that Lake Van has no outlet, okay? It has rivers coming in from the north and the east and the west, and but during Paleo times, during the pre-Holocene, before the Younger Dryas, there was one river, a major river that used to exit the lake in the southwest part of the lake, right next to Mount Nemrut. It was called the Murat River, okay? And the Murat River was what allowed the lake levels of Lake Van, to remain consistent, okay? Well, you find out that the Murat River was completely blocked off by the volcanic eruption of Mount Nemrut, okay?
12,000-ish.
12,000 plus years ago, whenever that was. And so imagine right now you have Lake Van and a civilization is there and they build this incredible set of temples and structures along the edge of the lake.
But
now,
the water was still coming in.
Well, of course, they would never build right where the water's lapping up against the edge of it. They would build in some beautiful place that they knew could survive a very long time and be important to them. Everything was that the ancient lost civilizations did was meticulous and perfect. Didn't seem like they did anything and made any mistakes, as far as I'm aware. So there was not a situation where Lake Van was like rising up every year and flooding areas and then dropping down. No, it was a very steady lake level of just normal lake fluctuations, right? So that's why they built it there. Well, in order for them to build at that location that they did, it's not that Lake Van would have had to been 85 feet lower. It would have had to been more like 100 feet lower or more, because these ruins are at 85 feet deep, right? Does that make sense? So what could account for a lake rising over 100 feet? Join me September of 2025 for a tour of the Lake Van area of Turkey to explore its ancient megalithic ruins. You can sign up on my website at thestageoftime.com. We'll see you there.